There are great actors. There are great artists. But few, very few, are on a first-name basis with the world. The recipient of the 1994 AFI Life Achievement Award, ladies and gentlemen, Jack Nicholson.
I don't know about that there only being one Jack either. I'm sure there's some here in the audience. But thank you very much for that stirring introduction, Gene. Now I'm going to tell you the stuff you don't know about. Fabulous stuff. First of all, you may not know that we got a telegram from Frank Capra. This was the second, and I believe still the second, film to receive Best Picture, Director, Writer, Actress, Actor, all five of those categories. And what was, that was lovely, wasn't it, for me? But even more important was, up until the science fiction special effects revolution, it was the highest grossing picture in the history of the movies, which I found particularly delightful. My first contact with him, thank God he's over introducing Spartacus, Kirk Douglas, because he already attacked me in the lobby. He's never forgiven me for playing this part. But my contact with him was not as an actor, because as a semi-working actor, I underline semi, my writing partner, Don Devlin, and I tried to option the book when it first came out in 1963. And of course, Kirk had already optioned it, so that was my first contact with that part of the family. But I was very lucky to be in the movie, because Hal Ashby had presented to me, one of my dearest friends. But because I had studied the book, I had more than probably was good ideas about the screenplay. And Michael, I said, well, Michael, I'll read it again, Milo. I said, oh, Milos and I had hung out at film festivals like this Festival Rats just before this. I knew him and knew that he started as a screenwriter to begin with. And, you know, we talked, if a Czech and an American can, a common language. When I reminisce about, you know, now we start, you know, I just talked to Michael last week. He stopped by. He said, I'll never forget your face when you saw that cast come off that plane the first time. Because, you know, I knew sort of who Bill Redfield was and Billy Dewey. And I knew Sidney Lassick as a kind of an apocryphal story, but I'd never seen Danny DeVito, who looked pretty weird in the picture. Christopher Lloyd. You know, plenty of these people I still don't understand. Dalo Smith is in the picture. He's a philanthropist from the Midwest with a beard. I could see where they sat. And I thought Milos, he's gone Eastern European. He's gone into some modern day bedlam and gotten a bunch of nuts to be in the picture. Michael told you about that. The other one was, I'd seen the play a couple of times. Warren Oates did it here in Los Angeles. And I was always bothered. In fact, I you won't believe this, but I turned down The Godfather because I thought Italians should, you know, it was that period in the early 60s, so they should get a, you know, up till then, you know, Tony Franciosa's being an out for the movies, or so Italians should play it. And in this case, you know, I wasn't sure I was right and so forth, was it? But the one thing was the big Indian, right? I'd seen Italians and so forth. Now, here comes the first time I see him. You know, Will Sampson had a cowboy hat on, this big braids with red ribbons in it, checked dungarees, and a big portfolio with his drawings, quite beautiful drawings, in it like this. I see, all I could think was, geez, he is the biggest goddamn Indian I ever saw. guy is correct for the part. I mean, a lot about the casting. I had asked Louise Fletcher. Now, I had asked Anne Bancroft about it. I don't like necessarily asking and all this and so forth. And I thought she, the ladies, Colleen, they didn't want to play heavies in this period, which kind of shocked me as a male chauvinist. But my friend Fred Roos, who I'm sure is down with somebody else on this deal, mentioned Louise Fletcher, whom I had seen in Thieves Like Us. That's all he had to say, because when you see those dish blue eyes of a murderer, you know what I mean, in that sweet woman's face, that was it. She's in the picture. And Scatman Crothers is in the picture, who I promised when we did King of Marvin Gardens, he already had the part. God love him, he was still hustling me after he had it. He said, relax, I'm gonna put you in 4 or 5, half a dozen classics, Scatman, before we're finished, which we almost made the top of it. Marvin Gardens, The Shining, The Fortune, and this. And this was one of the great guys. He gave lectures at the concerts at the hospital. One of the great audiences. Have I been 3 minutes? One of the great audiences that I've ever seen, because they were like children who were some way challenged. And there was one guy, I don't even know, but there must have been a letter, a chord, and every time Scatman said anything, and you'd finally figure out it had some weird reference, you'd hear from the back of these, which it's not that funny, but in that situation, it's like... He went every week, Scatman, and did these things, fabulous. And I improvised a lot in this period. The baseball game I did from the box score of the game itself. Milos liked to improvise also. And because my daughter was on the set with Dr. Brooks, I kind of was showing off for her, and I think maybe it's the best improvisation I ever did, because all he did was read me the application, and I answered the questions. But I was up for it because my daughter Jennifer was there. I was kind of showing off a little bit. But the best improvisation, I'm saying these things because you might see them in the film, was Danny DeVito, who the first time we did the basketball game, I passed him the ball like this, and he turned around and threw it right into the fence where the camera was. I mean, I laughed so hard. I thought, what an impulse, fantastic. You want to prove, yeah, I got it. He's like completely insane. Gibbs, my stuntman, also deceased, like Vinny Schiavelli, another guy that gets off the plane. Directors are not that happy about stuntmen. They think they want to blow everything up. I stayed with Gibbs forever because he's a method stuntman. And since he'd been in jail, before he talked to me, he figured out how to break out of this prison before he set up the stunt and jumping over the thing. I did not jump. We know that. Another thing about that, I won't reminisce much more. When I looked at the cast list, I forgot Angelica Houston was also in the picture. That, I talked to her recently also. That was nice. I remembered when we went on the boat, Chris Lloyd was very seasick. Anyway, I don't know if you've seen this picture. I hope you enjoy it. And I know it was a little more than 3 minutes, but I appreciate it. And really, I fool around a lot. But thank you very much for coming.